Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving deep into a subject that, it really forms the silent backbone of innovation, safety, and product usability.
It really does.
We're talking about technical documentation. So the instructions, the specifications, the procedures, all those things we rarely think about until suddenly we can't figure out how to put something together.
Or worse, someone gets hurt. It's the essential bridge between an inventor's brilliant idea and, the end user's successful, safe operation.
Exactly.
The source material for this deep dive really hammers home a crucial insight. Even the most cutting-edge, well-engineered product, it just fails if people can't successfully use it.
I mean, think about the complexity of modern life. You're assembling a computer motherboard or flying a sophisticated drone or ensuring critical processes in a hospital are followed perfectly.
Documentation is basically the operating system for all of that. It has to work.
Absolutely. So the mission for you, our listener, is to extract the key steps and principles, the secrets of the trade, if you will, from all this material.
And by the end of this deep dive, you really will be instantly well-informed on planning, drafting, and designing world-class documentation.
You'll be prepared for everything from high-stakes safety protocols to, simple, engaging user manuals.
We've broken this analysis down logically. We'll start by defining the three distinct types of documentation because, and this is key, they are not interchangeable.
Right.
Then we'll move into the critical planning phase, which starts not with writing, but with some really deep reader research.
Done that for that.
And finally, we'll drill into the rigorous, almost mathematical rules for drafting, applying the strict hierarchy of safety labeling and addressing the massive challenge of transcultural design in a global market.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
So technical documentation is often treated as, this single thing, a monolith. But our sources clearly delineate three core categories.
They do.
And understanding which category you are writing in determines your structure, your language, everything.
That's the starting point. It really is. If you mix the expectations of one category into another, you lose all clarity. The three core pillars are instructions, specifications, and procedures or protocols.
Let's start simple with instructions. This is what most people picture, right?
Instructions are what most people think of when they hear manual. They describe how to perform a specific task, leading the end user step by step from beginning to completion.
So very sequential.
Highly sequential and very focused on the specific, tangible action taken by the primary user. How to assemble a desk, how to install a water filter, or how to set up software. It's just a linear path to a finished state.
Now let's jump immediately into the deep end. Specifications or specs.
Okay, yeah.
These are worlds apart from basic instructions, aren't they? Primarily because the required precision and the audience just shift dramatically.
Exactly. Specifications are written by experts for experts, engineers, or specialized technicians. Their purpose is to describe in minute, verifiable detail exactly how a product is built or how a routine technical process is completed.
So if instructions are about using the product,
then specs are about validating the product or process. It's a whole different word.
And the level of rigor here it's astonishing. I want to spend a moment on the example the sources provide. It's a specification for dry flow testing of flowable backfill used by civil engineers.
Oh, this is a great example.
This isn't just a guide. It's a legal, technical mandate.
It is. This example perfectly illustrates the difference. The document doesn't just say, measure the material. It outlines the entire scope. It lists the specific references that must be cited and defines all terminology so there is zero ambiguity.
But the equipment, the apparatus required.
Look at that, yeah. They specify a balance classified as a G2 and a timing device with an accuracy to within 0.1 seconds.
0.1 second. I mean, who would even notice if a measurement was off by a fraction of a second?
Engineers and auditors would. That's who. That precision is mandated because the entire purpose of a specification is repeatable quality.
So it's about consistency across the board.
Absolutely. If a civil engineering firm in Dubai is testing backfill according to the spec, and a firm in Chicago is testing it, they must achieve the same result. Why? Because they used equipment calibrated to the same extreme standards and followed the exact same formulas.
And the document even has the formulas in it.
Oh, yes. It includes complex calculation formulas for determining the weight of fine aggregate in dry versus flow testing conditions. It is extreme rigor, all designed to remove human error and variance.
It's really the essence of specs then. Repeatable, auditable, quality assurance.
You've got it.
Okay, now let's move to the third pillar, procedures or protocols. These seem to govern human behavior more in an organizational context.
That's a great way to put it. Procedures and protocols are primarily written to ensure consistency and quality within a workplace, often standardizing high stakes or frequently repeated actions where, consistency is paramount. They govern how people interact within a system.
And the quintessential example in our sources comes from the healthcare industry, which makes perfect sense.
Yes, think of hospital protocols. The source material mentions the Trauma Arrest Protocol 4109.
Okay.
So, when a patient goes into trauma arrest, the medical team is under extreme stress. Lives are on the line. This protocol describes the exact sequence of actions doctors and nurses must take.
And I imagine there's no fluff in that document.
Zero. These documents are characterized by their brevity. They usually have an incredibly brief introduction defining the medical condition, followed by an aggressive use of numbered lists and nested points. There is no room for narrative or reflection.
It's just pure action.
Pure sequential action, designed to be referenced quickly and executed without a moment's hesitation.
So, to recap, we have instructions for end-user assembly, specifications for technical validation and repeatability, and procedures for organizational consistency and high-stakes action.
They all guide action, but the intended rigor, the audience, they're all fundamentally different.
And that difference in intent, it dictates the model structures, right?
Exactly. If we compare the organizational patterns visually presented in the source, we see these clear functional distinctions.
The instructions and procedures models, they share a sort of intuitive, linear path focused on completion. You've got the title, introduction, the all-important list of materials and parts, then step 1, step 2, and a conclusion.
Right, a very logical flow. The specification model, however, is built for testing and verification, not end-user assembly.
So it's structured differently.
A bit, yes. It still requires the title, introduction, and materials, but the conclusion isn't about troubleshooting a wobbly table. It focuses on measurement, test, and quality control procedures.
Focus shifts.
Completely. It shifts from did I build it right to did the process yield the required technical result. It's a question of validation.
And what's the one critical element that's shared across all three of these models, regardless of whether you're building a bookcase or following a trauma protocol?
Graphics and safety information.
Non-negotiable.
Absolutely non-negotiable. This isn't information that can be, relegated to an appendix. It must be integrated into the document, appearing throughout where needed in every type of documentation.
So if a step involves a hazard,
the warning must precede that step. It doesn't matter if it's a consumer manual or a civil engineering spec. That integration is a hard and fast rule. So now that we know what type of document we're writing, we can move to the foundation. Planning.
Right.
And planning begins by mastering the rhetorical situation. That means understanding the complete context in which the document will exist.
This is where we define the document's rhetoric by answering the 5 W and how questions. Now, this sounds a bit like high school English class.
It does, but don't let that fool you.
But answering these 6 questions thoroughly is the difference between documentation that works and documentation that, well, causes harm.
Let's really dissect them because the implications here are pretty deep.
Okay, first, who might use this documentation? This is the audience analysis, which I know we'll dive into more. Second, why is it needed? Assembly, legal compliance, training, safety.
All good. But the next 3 are where the context really expands. Where will the documentation be used?
What do you mean by where?
I mean, will it be printed out and laminated on a wet factory floor? Will it be viewed on a massive screen in a control room? Or accessed via a small mobile phone screen at some remote installation site?
The medium dictates the design.
The medium dictates everything. Font, layout, graphic complexity. You can't ignore it.
And then, when will it be used? Is this a casual instruction read during the daytime or an emergency protocol read at 3 a.m. during a blackout?
Right. The color contrast, the need for high visibility warnings, all of that depends on the time and the stress level involved.
Okay. And finally, how will it be used?
How? Will the reader follow it once, sequentially, like they're assembling a kit? Or will they constantly jump back and forth to use it as a reference tool, like a standard operating procedure?
Because a reference document needs a much better index.
A much more robust index and cross-referencing system. Absolutely.
That who question, the reader, it seems like the most complex element because our sources clearly state that technical communication must simultaneously address 4 distinct types of readers. We can't just get away with writing for just one person.
This is where so many documentation efforts fail. They focus only on the end user, and they completely neglect the organizational and legal context around them.
Let's start with the obvious one then. The primary readers. These are the action takers.
Right. If you're designing documentation for a new 3D printer, the primary readers are the hobbyists or the engineers who are actually running the printer.
So you're focused on their skill level.
Their skill level, their age, their ability to handle fine motor skills, and how much they already know about 3D printing. If they are a total novice, your language has to be incredibly simple.
But then you have the secondary readers, the advisors.
Yes, and these are supervisors, managers, or trainers. They aren't doing the task themselves, but they are checking the primary reader's work or maybe providing guidance.
So they need something different from the document.
They need documentation that allows them to quickly scan for key metrics or safety checks without having to read every single step. They need the high-level view.
Okay, moving up in stakes, we find the tertiary readers, the evaluators. This group, I feel like, is often completely ignored during the initial draft.
Almost always. These are the auditors, quality experts, or critically, the lawyers who review documentation after a quality failure or, heaven forbid, an accident.
So they're reading it after something has already gone wrong.
Exactly. The tertiary reader's focus is on due diligence. They don't care if the primary reader was happy. They care if the documentation met all regulatory compliance standards, if safety warnings were clearly and legally placed, and if the organization can prove that the user was adequately warned of every possible hazard.
So let's pause here, because this creates a fundamental conflict, doesn't it?
It does.
The primary reader needs short, simple language, maybe even visual comics, to minimize their cognitive load. But the tertiary reader requires precise legal language, detailed safety clauses, and extensive evidence of due diligence.
So how do you satisfy both in the same document?
Exactly.
This is the art of design. It really is. You satisfy the primary reader through clear, concise command voice steps, well-placed graphics, and minimal text in the core steps.
To keep it clean for them.
You keep it clean. You satisfy the tertiary reader by using the precise, standardized signal words danger, warning, caution, integrating those warnings visually, and using nested notes and legal disclaimers after the core steps or in an appendix.
So the key is separation.
The key is separation. Keep the action steps clean for the user and relegate the audit information to clear, auditable structures for the lawyer. The primary reader just skips right over the nesting, but the tertiary reader relies on it.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, and the fourth type?
The fourth type are the gatekeeper readers. These are the supervisors, potentially without deep subject expertise, who have to approve the documentation before it gets published. They're checking for high-level quality assurance, branding adherence, and just organizational consensus.
So you have to write it clearly enough for them to sign off on it.
You have to write clearly enough that they can approve it quickly, often without reading the specifications for a G2 balance.
Right. Okay, so once we've mapped out these four audiences and we know why we are writing, we move into the rigorous process of researching the subject.
Yes. And this is where we move past the product design schematics and into the real world.
The field work.
This is the field work. The source material outlines 6 holistic research steps that must be completed. This is what guarantees your documentation matches reality, not just theory.
First up, do background research.
You need to know the product history, its previous iterations, and all prior documentation. If a previous instruction manual led to a lawsuit, you need to know why and address that failure proactively. Don't simply reinvent the wheel.
That seems critical. Second, make observations.
This is arguably the most valuable step. You must observe people, ideally novices, actually attempting to use the product or perform the process, watch them make coffee, assemble the shelf, or navigate the software.
And why are their mistakes so important? Why focus on the failure?
Because documentation isn't written for the perfect scenario, it's written for the failure point. If you watch 3 people try to assemble a specific part and they all hold it upside down first,
You know you have a problem.
you know you need a massive, unmissable graphic and a specific warning right before that step. Those observed mistakes are gold. They allow you to anticipate trouble spots and confusion points for non-experts.
Third, ask subject matter experts, or SMEs.
Yes. Interview people who are deeply familiar with the process. They bridge that gap between the idealized design and how it's used in the real world. An engineer might design a tool to be used one way in a lab,
But the person in the field knows better.
but the SME who uses it in the field every day knows that everyone actually uses a shortcut or a slightly different technique because the initial design is cumbersome.
And your documentation needs to reflect that reality, not the ideal.
Exactly. If the SME tells you, yeah, we all skip steps 4 and 5 because we found a better way, you must either update the design or update the documentation to reflect the actual best practice.
Okay, number 4 is use your senses. This sounds a little odd for technical writing.
It does, but it adds crucial verification details. You need to incorporate details about appearance, sounds, smells, textures, and even tastes where it's applicable.
Could you give me an example?
Sure. If mixing a certain chemical requires a reaction that produces a specific, say, sweet smell, you include that. Wait until the mixture turns deep blue and emits a slightly sweet odor before proceeding.
So the reader can verify they did it right.
They can verify via sensory input that they have reached the correct state before proceeding to the next, potentially dangerous step.
Makes sense. 5th is describe motion and change.
Right. Pay special attention to the movements and changes in state. If a motor part shifts from position A to position B, or if a liquid changes viscosity, those transitions must be described clearly and accurately.
So the reader knows the action is complete and successful.
Exactly. And 6th, collect visuals. Gather graphics, photographs, and diagrams. But these must not be stock images. They must be specific labeled visuals that directly illustrate the corresponding written step.
Because if the picture doesn't match the text, it's just more confusion.
It confuses the reader, and it completely negates the value of the instruction.
Okay, we've established the context, researched the subject, and anticipated the reader's struggles. Now we finally get to write, and we start at the top with the title and introduction.
And the title must be specific and precise. The example in the source material is powerful. Don't call it RGS 90X telescope. That's just a product name.
Right. It's not a task.
It's not a task. Call it setting up your RGS 90X telescope. The good title clearly describes the specific task the reader is about to complete.
And the introduction, it seems like it has a huge list of mandatory inclusions, especially for complex tasks.
It really has to sell the document and set the stage for action. It must define the subject, state the purpose, stress the importance and safety of the task, describe the necessary technical ability or training required.
It also needs to identify the time commitment. Is this a 10-minute job or a 4-hour assembly?
And critically motivate the readers.
Motivating readers in a manual. That feels strange. Why is motivation necessary here?
Because readers often approach manuals with anxiety or frustration or just apathy. You need to remind them why they are doing this task and why completing it correctly is important to them.
So you're managing their mood.
You are managing their mood before they even start.
Right.
If it's for a fun product, motivate them with the joy they'll experience when it's done. If it's a procedure, motivate them with the importance of consistency and safety.
Okay, moving past the intro, we get to what I think of as the gatekeeper section. The crucial list of requirements. Parts, tools, conditions.
Yeah.
I know from personal experience, if this section is messed up, the entire project is doomed from the start.
Absolutely. This section must precede the steps, or you trigger what we call mid-process frustration. You must list the parts required and verify them against the package contents. Include the unglamorous things, the batteries, the adhesives, that tiny packet of grease.
Because if the reader discovers they are missing a critical part at step 7, they are not going to be happy.
They're unlikely to continue in good faith, let's put it that way.
And the same goes for identifying tools required.
If a reader has to stop their work, drive to a hardware store for some specialized hex key, their perception of the quality of the entire product just plummets.
So list everything.
List all necessary tools, even if they seem obvious, like safety glasses or a Phillips head screwdriver, no assumptions.
And don't forget the special conditions.
Right. If the environment dictates success, you must mandate it. If you're documenting how to apply specialized paint, you must include the requirement. Paint is best applied between 50 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
Or static electricity for electronics.
Exactly. If you're installing equipment sensitive to static, you must specify the humidity requirements. These non-material requirements are just as non-negotiable as the physical parts.
Once everything is verified and gathered, we arrive at the heart of the document, the sequentially ordered steps. This is where technical documentation drafting becomes a science.
It really does. The steps must be presented logically. The source suggests concept mapping to ensure the overall task is broken down into manageable major and minor steps.
And that's also where you map the notes and hazard statements.
Right. You map them directly to the relevant action so nothing gets missed.
We have several non-negotiable rules for drafting the actions themselves. Rule 1, use command voice or the imperative mood.
Every single step must start with a strong action verb, speaking directly to the reader. Place the telescope on the stand, tighten the screws evenly, plug the coil cord into the terminal.
It's direct, it's concise, and it eliminates ambiguity.
It does.
Okay, rule 2, and this is where I think most poor manuals fail. State one action per step. This is the big safety and clarity rule.
It is fundamental. You have to avoid combining actions, even if they are often performed simultaneously in the real world. The source material gives the classic example of failure. Incorrect. Insert a low-power eyepiece into the diagonal and tighten the thumb screw.
But why is that incorrect? I mean, a user might do both in one fluid motion.
Because if the reader encounters trouble, say the eyepiece won't fit, or the thumb screw snaps, they can't easily locate the specific point of failure within a combined instruction.
Oh, okay.
By breaking it into 2 distinct numbered steps. 1, insert the low-power eyepiece, and 2, tighten the thumb screw until snug. You provide 2 discrete checkpoints. It aids compliance, tracking, and troubleshooting for the primary reader.
And it provides audible checkpoints for the tertiary reader, the lawyer.
You got it.
Rule 3, keep the steps concise. Use short, focused phrases. Eliminate the prose.
And rule 4, number the steps. Simple instructions use a simple 1, 2, 3 list. But for complex specifications and procedures, we run into nesting.
Let's elaborate on nesting, because this is where documentation structure can get really intense. We saw the example, 10.2.1.3. Note, what does that structure communicate?
It communicates hierarchy and context instantly. In procedures, especially those requiring high levels of precision, like cleanroom operations or medical protocols, actions often require sub-actions.
Can you walk me through that example?
Sure. Imagine step 10 is prepare personal protective equipment. Step 10.1 might be don the full body coverall. Step 10.2 is secure face and hands. Step 10.2.1 is don nitrile gloves.
And the 10.2.1.3 note.
That's a specific caution related to the glove material or application. This nested structure ensures that a reader in a high-stress scenario knows exactly which piece in context or which sub-action relates to which main step. It guarantees no critical detail gets lost.
That makes the document instantly scannable and verifiable, essential for both the primary user and their supervisor.
Right. And once that core action is drafted, we move to refining the steps by adding context. You must add comments, notes, or examples after the corresponding step. This is where you put definitions or troubleshooting advice.
So you don't interrupt the flow of the command voice steps.
You don't interrupt the flow, but you acknowledge where the reader might struggle. And offering feedback is vital, especially for novices tackling a complex task.
So what does that look like?
After a difficult sequence, provide encouragement or a checkpoint. If the light is now solid green, you have successfully calibrated the antenna. This affirmation helps readers assess their progress and it reduces their anxiety.
And finally, integrating those visuals we collected, referred to the graphics.
The graphics have to be labeled, like Figure 4, and referenced in the text immediately adjacent to the step they illustrate. There should never be a mystery about which picture corresponds to which action.
No ambiguity.
None. If the graphics aren't labeled, they must appear exactly where the action is described to reinforce the written text seamlessly.
All right, we've moved from planning to organization. Now, we polish the style and integrate the crucial elements of safety and design. And the foundational rule here is developing a plain style.
Technical documentation is all about communication efficiency. And that means using simple words, minimizing technical jargon, and if you have to use it, defining unfamiliar words instantly.
And keep sentences short.
Most importantly, keep sentences short. The source wisely suggests they should be within breathing length. If the sentence requires the reader to pause for a breath in the middle, it's too long for easy comprehension during a task.
But style is also psychological. We need to talk about managing reader tone. Technical documentation isn't just dry data. It reflects the anticipated emotional state of the reader.
This is a really nuanced point of rhetorical strategy. If you anticipate that your readers are negative or anxious or even angry, maybe they're assembling a product that arrived broken.
Or they're dealing with a complex regulatory burden.
Right. Your language should counteract that negativity. You should introduce words like easy, pleasure, pleasant, delight to soothe and motivate them.
Okay, so if I were writing instructions for, say, a complex warranty claim process, instead of just writing complete Form 3B and remit to the regional office, how would I apply that tone mapping?
Well, you might rewrite it to say something like, to make this process as pleasant as possible, easily complete Form 3B, and we will delight in assisting you with your claim.
Even if the process itself isn't pleasant at all.
Especially then. Using those softer words helps manage the reader's internal state. Conversely, if your readers are already eager assembling a high-performance race car kit, Maybe use an enthusiastic tone with words like excited, energetic, pumped up to match their mood.
That shifts the documentation from being merely functional to being psychologically persuasive. But I imagine persuasion stops when safety starts.
It does.
Here is where style becomes highly regulated. The 4 levels of safety information.
This hierarchy is legally critical and internationally standardized. It tells the reader the precise risk involved, and it provides legal accountability for the organization.
At the top is danger. This signals the absolute highest risk, serious injury or death.
This is reserved for immediate, life-threatening hazards. The source mentions using it to warn about disconnecting a spark plug before cleaning a lawnmower blade. If you fail to do so, the engine could start and cause a severe, potentially fatal injury.
So you use it sparingly.
You only use it when there is real and imminent danger.
Next down is warning.
Warning signals that injury is likely if the step is handled improperly. The example here is handling a hot soldering iron. If you touch it incorrectly, you will be burned. It's serious, but typically not immediately fatal.
And that distinction is key.
The distinction between danger and warning often comes down to the degree of harm and the immediacy of the threat.
Then we move down to caution.
Caution alerts readers that mistakes may cause damage to the product or equipment, but personal injury is unlikely. This might be used when over-tightening a filter or screwing a delicate electronic component in too hard. The equipment is at risk, not the person.
And finally, the lowest level, notice.
Notice is used for situations where injury and damage are very unlikely. It signals best practices or methods to help people achieve the best results, like noting the optimal direction for attaching an antenna cable for maximum reception.
And let's just reiterate the placement requirement here.
It's critical. All safety information must appear in the introduction for general awareness and immediately before the relevant step. The tertiary reader, the lawyer, will specifically look for evidence that the warning is placed adjacent to the hazard.
Moving beyond text, we need a functional and attractive page layout. Design elements are tools for comprehension, not just decoration.
Exactly. That means integrating graphics that clearly reinforce the written steps. They have to be legible, properly labeled. It also means using highlighting things like boxes, borders, and lines to visually draw the eye to crucial text.
Especially the danger or warning statements.
Especially those to ensure they stand out from the normal text flow. And of course, we rely on clear, functional headings to structure the document and standardized symbols.
Like the international symbols for hot surfaces or radiation.
Using universal icons, like the ISO AE symbols for hot surfaces, laser light, or radiation, reinforces the written safety text without creating language barriers. It's a key part of global design.
After all this drafting, we finally reach the conclusion and user testing. The conclusion itself is essential, isn't it?
It is. The conclusion must signal completion, maybe offer encouragement or congratulate the reader. It should describe the finished product, provide troubleshooting information, often in a clear table format, and mention anything learned during the task.
And then the final humbling step, user testing.
You can't just assume the document works because you wrote it well. You have to test it.
With real users.
With real users, using 4 essential methods. First, read and locate tests to ensure readers can quickly find specific information. Second, understandability tests to verify the language makes sense to the target audience.
And then performance.
Third, performance tests where users actually follow the steps to complete the task. This is where you catch the 1 action per step failures. And fourth, safety tests to confirm all warnings are correctly located and understood.
And if testing reveals a bug, you revise and retest.
You must revise and retest. It's an iterative process.
As businesses operate across borders, the demands placed on technical documentation just skyrocket. We have to address the complexities of transcultural documentation. What works perfectly in Omaha may be useless or even offensive in Oman.
This is so vital. When documentation crosses cultural boundaries, you have to adapt for diverse readers. And we can break this down into verbal and design considerations.
Okay, on the verbal consideration side, the most immediate task is translation.
Right, you must translate the text professionally. For highly technical or legal documents, it is often recommended to include both the original language like English and the translated version to ensure fidelity.
But professional translation isn't enough, is it? Not if the original document is full of cultural shortcuts.
It's completely insufficient. You must use basic English. Avoid jargon, idioms, and metaphors understood only by North Americans. Idioms like back to square one, senior citizens, or foul ball. They're just meaningless or confusing to international readers.
And we had to be extremely cautious with branding. You must check names and slogans. The source provides the famous failure anecdote of Pepsi.
Yes, the classic. Pepsi tried to translate their slogan, "Come alive with Pepsi," into certain Asian markets, only for it to be rendered as, "Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave."
Which is not the intended message.
Not at all. That is a catastrophic failure of transcultural communication, and it stems from a fundamental lack of understanding of the target audience's context and spiritual beliefs.
A real lesson in avoiding cultural blindness. Then we move to the design considerations, which deals with visual communication.
And here, you must use icons carefully. Symbols we view as universal can be highly charged or offensive elsewhere. A pointing finger, used for emphasis in North American documents, is highly offensive in many Middle Eastern and Central American countries.
Even the OK sign.
Even the simple OK hand sign is considered offensive in certain parts of the Middle East and elsewhere.
And why do icons fail so often on a global scale?
Because visuals are shorthand. They assume a shared, low-context cultural understanding. But many global cultures are high-context, where communication relies heavily on nonverbal cues, shared history, and cultural norms.
So a simple picture can carry a lot of unintended weight.
A simple graphic of a dog, which is viewed as friendly in the West, is considered an unclean animal in many cultures. Your simple visual aid can instantly undermine the trust and credibility of the entire document.
And similarly, you have to use images carefully.
Images of people must be culturally appropriate. Avoid displays of excessive emotion in professional settings in conservative cultures. If you show two men shaking hands, ensure the image doesn't imply a business relationship that might be culturally inappropriate for the region. Every visual decision has to be scrutinized. Now, shifting focus entirely, let's look at the microgenre of emergency instructions. This is documentation under the highest possible stress.
Used in crises, right? Like airplane seat cards or subway evacuation plans.
Exactly. The stakes are maximum and the time for comprehension is minimal.
So what are the key strategies for this kind of extreme documentation?
Priority 1. Maximum visibility and simplicity. You have to put the title in large lettering, at least 26-point font size, so someone who is panicking can locate the correct card instantly.
And keep it short.
Use only one or two sides of a page or card to prevent users from flipping through unnecessary bulk.
And the language must be just brutal in its simplicity.
Yes. Use simple language, short, brief sentences, and command voice. You must minimize all unnecessary explanations. Your priority order must be clear. Safety first.
And that order is?
Prioritize the safety of people, then machinery, then property in that order, and immediately tell readers to contact 911 or responders.
The BART evacuation instructions are a textbook example of this mastery, aren't they?
They really are. They achieve rapid comprehension by using bold visual icons and a strict three-part instruction model. Look, listen, respond.
It breaks it down.
This pattern breaks the complex emergency process into easily digestible chunks, aiding quick comprehension even when the reader is experiencing intense psychological stress.
Finally, we have to end this deep dive with the absolute cost of ignoring these principles, which is perfectly encapsulated in the purified water case study involving Jim, Helena, and Vaughn. This just ties together everything we've discussed about planning and reader context.
It does. Jim Helena was the designer of innovative, solar-powered water purifiers destined for community use in South America and Africa. The project was high-profile and designed to be highly beneficial, solving a critical public health issue.
So what went wrong was a failure of the rhetorical situation, specifically the context of use.
That's it, exactly. The documentation, created by Jim's team in North America, assumed the primary reader was starting with water that was already treated tap water.
Which is the baseline assumption here.
It's the baseline assumption in North American contexts. They designed the filter replacement schedule based on that assumption, projecting the filters would last 15 to 20 weeks.
But the target users were relying on highly contaminated, untreated water sources.
Yeah.
They were the primary readers, and the product was failing them not because of the design, but because of the documentation's false assumptions.
And the implication was catastrophic. When used with highly contaminated water, the filters clogged quickly within just 3 to 6 weeks, instead of the anticipated 4 to 5 months.
And Jim's supervisor, Vaughn, He initially wanted to focus on the logistics, right? Just get them more filters.
Right, he saw it as a supply chain problem. Just ship more filters more often.
But Jim realized the true failure.
Jim realized the documentation and the entire underlying usage model had failed to account for the primary reader's actual context. Requiring users to replace filters every 3 weeks rather than every 15 makes the entire system economically unsustainable for the local communities.
So the product becomes a burden.
It becomes a burden, and the consequence was that the high-profile, beneficial product was at risk of becoming a failed project. Users might just abandon the filter system entirely due to the replacement hassle and costs,
And then they'd revert to using contaminated water.
and face serious health risks. The failure to plan for the actual contaminated water environment completely negated the value of the technological innovation itself. It is such a powerful warning that documentation is not an accessory. It is an integrated safety and usability feature.
That case study it drives home the essential lesson of this deep dive so powerfully. We've moved from defining the 3 critical documentation types, instructions, specs, and procedures, to mastering the research phase
And understanding the nuanced needs of 4 different reader types.
and applying the strict rules of precise sequencing, like using command voice and sticking to that 1 action per step rule.
We detailed the crucial role of safety, recognizing the rigid hierarchy of danger, warning, caution, and notice, and the absolute necessity of testing documents using performance and safety tests.
And we saw how easily global good intentions can be derailed by failing to adapt documentation for transcultural readers, whether it's through an offensive icon or just a disastrous translation.
The core takeaway is crystal clear. Quality documentation is integral to safety, usability, and business success.
If you fail to plan for your actual primary reader's context, as the Purifier case study demonstrated, you can completely undermine even the greatest technological innovation. It's really about accountability.
And we also learned that documentation can be elevated beyond just mere instruction. I mean, think back to the matchstick rocket instructions mentioned in the source material.
Right.
They explain not just how to build the rocket, but why it worked by integrating an explanation of Newton's third law. The documentation was transformed into a powerful teaching tool.
So here's a provocative thought for you to consider as you go forward. We've established that technical documentation is an act of translation. It's translating complexity into clarity. Now, consider a complex concept in your own professional life, be it a scientific process, a business strategy, or a detailed piece of software. How could you apply these principles, the rigorous research, the 1 action per step rule, the command voice, and the focus on the emotional tone, to create a set of simple, well-researched, and engaging instructions that not only explain how to do it, but fundamentally teach the reader why it works?
How can you turn your documentation into a teaching tool rather than just a guide?
That's all we have time for on this deep dive. We hope this knowledge helps you navigate and elevate the quality of documentation you encounter and create.
Until next time.